Hey everyone, if you can hear me, let me know. I'm just waiting in for a few more people to join in before I start the meeting. Thanks, Nick.
Hey Nick, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad.
Shame we woke you up at 1:30 again, dude. This is criminal.
It gets better. It gets better once the time zones change because of daylight savings. It goes to 4 a.m. instead of 2 a.m. soon.
Good Lord. How does that work? Do you guys change by 2 hours or does it do both?
We go. It's like we go forward an hour and you go back an hour or something. I can't remember.
because of the hemispheres. Wow, that's kind of funky.
Time zones, man. Just another one of those reasons why everyone's always like, time zones are hard.
I lived in South Africa a lot of the years, but fortunately they don't have daylight savings because that would have made it even more complicated. Cool. Who's WG LTS there? Is that
Hey Quinton, the ball here.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. Just keeping it quiet. We're just waiting for a couple of minutes for everybody to join in and then start the program. But yeah,
I mean, it's
that's
5
me
minutes
today.
now, man.
Tim's not in today.
Yeah.
And I missed you there, Nick.
It's 5 minutes after now, man.
Okay, so we can just start. Welcome everyone to another meeting for Working Group LTS. This meeting is getting recorded and will be posted on internet, so be careful of what you share here. We follow CNCF Code of Conduct. If you want to know what that is, you can look it up. But basically, it means be nice to everyone. And we start the meeting today with the agenda. We decided a few meetings ago that we will spend most of the next meetings working on the KEP, and that's what we plan to do this week too. So that's done, and now I won't feel like a record.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yes.
So is it worth recapping? I think Nick missed the last meeting, and I kind of gave you quite a bit of feedback on that KEP. So I don't know if it's worth just catching Nick up on that.
No, I think it should be in the notes or in the meeting, so I don't think we should spend time going back.
Okay. It looks like
everyone.
It looks like most of it is reasonably straightforward.
There is one critical feedback that was, hey, why don't we have a problem statement that describes the problem much better? We are working on a doc I have about Tim and I were writing something up that says, okay, this is probably what the working group is focusing on, and the problem statements, etc. It's not yet in a shape that I can share. So yeah, I think middle of this week or by end of this week, I'll share it on the channel so that everybody can take a look at it and review it. You can join in as an author, make changes. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess I wanted to ask what you all thought of the motivation bit I added, the summary of the two proposals, and then I put a bit in there about how this that this is a minimum viable change.
I'm not yet sure. Okay, so you're referring to the para that starts with in addition?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Usually it's easier if you add it as a suggestion, then it's easier to know what you added. But yeah, I think I like the text there. That kind of gives more context on why we are doing this. One of the feedbacks we got was, hey, we haven't been part of this meeting, so we don't know. But the way you have discussed why, the pros and cons of, say, Lubomir's proposal or Tim Sinclair's proposal, and why not long term, why just incremental steps. So I think you have introduced it clearly that, hey, this is probably a minimal viable change, minimum, because that's the viable one. So that's a good key, that's a good phrase actually. But yeah, we are working on a problem statement that's kind of gonna give a separate document that's gonna say what the working group did, and why are we focusing on this, and what's exactly the recommendations of the working group for the future also are, or at least the document is supposed to say that. And then when I share with everyone, probably we can all add to it, brainstorm even on that document like we have been doing on this KEP.
So I think, yeah, I mean, the reason why I did that was I kind of felt like Josh's comment was fair to an extent, like that, why are we only doing this? It was kind of the feeling that I got from Josh's comment. It's like, well, my response to that is, I feel like if we can't even do extending by one version, then any more ambitious proposals are never going to happen anyway. So, like, that's what I mean by minimum viable change. Like, it shouldn't be, this change is small enough that it almost feels like it shouldn't be a big deal, but equally at the same time, just looking at the list of actions just to do this is actually, it's a pretty big list. So I feel like if we can't even do this, then we're never going to be able to do anything more ambitious.
I agree, and I think Tim has responded to this, and I discussed briefly last time also that this is a minimal viable change, and when someone just looks at this talk, they don't really can't get the gist of what was discussed in the past. How did we end up saying, okay, let's just do minimal right now, and not a big change? Let's not make a monthly, let's not change, let's not touch the release cadence right now. Let's just touch the support cadence. And so I think all of those needs to be justified in a doc somewhere else so that people can read through that. And whenever you present this KEP to them, hey, we in this 1.17 cycle, we want this KEP to be passed along with all the other enhancements. You don't want them to be surprised. So probably a supporting document that provides links to all the documents that we have worked on in the past. I think we have about, when I looked at it, we had 4 big documents that people should go through before they understand what all the proposals are.
Yeah, but I think surely it should be possible for us to make a summary that's less than a huge big document. That's the history of the history of the working group.
Yeah, I think it's more of there's different perspectives on saying, okay, let's the problem statement should be defining, should probably help us justify the KEP, also should help say what should be actually the solution. What is our ideal vision of what should be the solution for, you know, what is this? What is this working group set out to do initially, like the charter that we decided, and you know, how do we achieve that goals? So that's kind of like, after a year we should probably have some idea about what we should be doing. So that's more that's where I think I spent most of the time in the talk, trying to explain, start from the charter and say what did we do, how did we do, and where did we focus, and whom did we meet, and more on that. It's more, yes, and then there is a portion that says, um, this is the summary, and this is probably the right next step, and this is probably the right final step. And that all of those are still, you know, just a couple of people who are writing that doc yet. So it's going to be in the working group, and working group will edit it again, like how we did right now. I started with this doc with 2 pages, and now we have 4, 5.
When you say this doc, are you referring to the KEP, or you're referring to the document that basically the white paper that this working group set out to create?
The white paper portion,
Okay.
the problem statement portion, yeah. So when I said this, I said when I say this doc, I mean the KEP. When I say the problem statement doc, I meant the problem statement doc. So this KEP started with just 2 pages.
Yeah, I get it. So I think I kind of feel like there's not really much point doing much more work on this without the problem statement bit being done. Like, you know, without the problem statement, it's going to be difficult to tighten up the wording of like a lot of the sections when you can't. Everything's got to link back to that problem statement to be like, why are we?
Yeah, that was essentially.
Yeah. If we can't write down that, so I mean, yeah.
Do you feel you don't have enough context on working on this doc, or how do you? I'm asking specific, Nick, to you, because you have been in all the meetings.
Yeah, so like, no, I think I do have enough context, but I feel like the wording of the problem statement is super important to make sure that I mean, I feel like we have a fair sense of what it will be, but like the wording is actually really important, because you want for this doc to make sense, like you need the problem statement that we put, should be in the summary or in the motivation, like on the first page, and then throughout the document we should be calling back to that problem statement to say, we are doing this addresses the problem statement in this way. You know, so so you kind of need the wording. I feel like
I agree.
So which is fine, man. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is, you know, if the problem statement is kind of closely linked to the history, and the history is not ready yet, that's cool. But it's just, I don't feel like we're going to be able to do much on the document until the history is done. Then that's fine. I don't mind. It's like, I'm not sure what we can do on the doc.
Yeah, I think the first 3 pages of the doc probably demands, like, you know, trying to word it in the way that the problem statement is. But I think the impact section, the API stability, the better tooling around patching and release, the description about what we mean by that still is independent of the problem statement. What do we mean by API stability? That's something that we should probably be better at defining, because we don't know what, I mean, even after 4 years, you still need to stabilize the API somewhere. There's always going to be work around API stability. So what do we mean by API stability? And I'm probably tilting towards defining those sections. I wanted to work on benefits, but you're right. Probably the benefits of the proposal are that you're solving the problem statement. So probably we can push the benefit section, because one thing I wanted to work on this, and what we decided in the past, was not just don't treat this KEP as a final version, but go to the SIGs that we had decided, get their feedback and modify this KEP back and say, okay, let's get this, let's introduce solutions to the problems that the individual SIGs mentioned. That was one of the points that even Jordan had brought in the last meetings, is that probably we should first go to the SIGs to say, hey, this is the idea. What do you think about it? What are we missing? How will you reach this goal? So I think instead of treating this as a final one, but when we go to them, we probably need to be having better understanding of what benefits we are posing from this gap. We all understand it in different ways. I think probably a proper wording there would be great. So I wanted to really focus on benefits when we are working on this talk. But you're right, bro. Maybe we should, in this week when we have the doc available. Tim is traveling this week, so I
Oh,
have
yeah.
3 days of my from 10 a.m. to the next 3 days are gonna be like full day booked meetings. So I'm like in that. So somewhere this week I will be able to share the doc with everyone.
Yeah. Okay. So no problem. That's fine. Look, I just wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what we could actually
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
okay. Well, so talk about the impacts then.
yeah.
The so yeah. I mean, so the API stability thing, like, I mean, I feel like the impact is that, so I think it's kind of twofold, right? Like, in order to be able to increase the support period at all, it requires greater API stability than we have, i.e. the core APIs all need to be GA, and most of the stuff that's commonly used also needs to be GA.
Yeah.
I know that. So I'm not really sure the best, the best way to word it, but like I think that's what it comes down to, is that, most of the things that most people use need to be stable, like need to be GA. They can't be still in the beta phase where where there's no contracts around, API stability. And that's both for the objects themselves in terms of the structs and the types and all that sort of stuff, and in terms of the REST API to them. I think that's one of the good things that Jordan has been really good at pulling us up on, is that when you talk about API, there's two things that you mean. The first one is the actual objects and the actual like structs in Go or whatever your language's equivalent is, and then there's the REST API as well, which is closely linked but still a separate thing.
I agree, and I think there is lack of understanding from my side about how the interfaces, how the Go library of Kubernetes. Whenever you treat Kubernetes as a Go library, what is the support statement around that? We recently had an issue with 1.16 release, and there was some statement around saying the Go client, the Go API is different from the Go portion is different from the actual API version support is different. So I think we need to get more understanding on that, saying, okay, are the Go clients, when we say API server is supported plus supports plus and minus version, what happens to the actual library code? Is that still supported? What happens to all the interfaces it exports? Is that supported? Or, do we support the client libs that we publish, saying you can use this, and what's the support for that? So if that's beyond that's not part of this, then that's different. Look at the statement I added to the doc. I've probably said most APIs should at least have one GA version, because we currently have a lot of base APIs like even Ingress are on beta, and we don't. So, and then beta has a different support versus it can change kind of a banner.
There's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that the object will not change substantially.
Yeah. So that's kind of like, we should have most of the, when you say I'm having a GA release, you should be able to say, okay, these are the APIs that I'm releasing this time, and these are guaranteed versus these are alpha and beta, and so this will change. This may not be supported for 1 year. So that's currently
That's actually a really good. That's a really good way to put it, though, is that if your API is not GA, then it's gonna make it hard to say that your API is going to be supported for as long, regardless of what we consider as long to be.
Yeah.
the APIs aren't GA, then we can't really say that it's supported. I don't know.
Yeah.
Quinn, I feel like Double and I are monopolizing. Do you have anything?
Just help me to understand something quickly. I was sort of involved in those alpha beta GA conversations right at the beginning of Kubernetes, and they were pretty strong statements. And in particular, so GA meant that the API was stable and the implementation of the API was stable, and stable meant it was essentially supported forever. So Kubernetes 1.0 would always support pods, and if you used this pod, it would work forever until Kubernetes 2.0 came out, and then maybe something would change.
Yeah, and then you would get a new GA like pods v2.
Exactly. And beta meant that the API was stable, finalized, that it was the API that was going to go GA. We had decided that this was going to go GA. It had just not baked long enough and was not stable enough.
Okay,
the
right.
implementation, but the API had already been agreed upon,
Right.
and it wasn't going to be pulled out from underneath you later. So you could start building your applications on this thing. Don't run them in production yet because the implementations are not stable, but the API is stable and it won't go away.
Yeah, okay.
And then alpha was the API is not stable yet and it may go away. So
Okay.
it sounds to me like we didn't, and that makes sense to me, in which case,
Yeah, it does. And I think that is the impression that I have, but I don't know if that's like, I mean, I don't think that that's written down
It's
clearly enough, or if it is, then I don't think I've read a good, I've never read it explained as successfully as that.
It was written down exactly like that years ago. And I haven't followed, API review and all these people since then very closely. So I don't know if they perhaps changed it or maybe did not enforce that very effectively. But I think we just need to be, and maybe Jordan's a better person to talk about this. But
I mean, Jordan is the right person. He would know exactly where that documentation is to be able to tell you.
We need to be careful about designing a process around, I mean, if it is the case that the beta APIs don't actually mean that they're stable APIs, and they're actually alpha, but we call them beta, then I think we just need to be very careful about designing another flawed process around a flawed process.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It would be better.
Then you can get your knickers in a twist, and
would be better.
They're supposed to be stable, but actually in practice they let them through, and they're not stable, and they make changes to beta APIs, and therefore, it sounds like we need to figure out what the foundation is before we move forward. And my understanding is that was the foundation. In which case, we can rely on beta APIs. We just can't rely on their implementations yet.
Yeah. Okay. I suspect that the core like API machinery people have that same understanding. But it may just be that. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time doing doing API machinery stuff, so I may not have been exposed to it. Yeah, I mean, originally I felt like one of the purposes of me being here was to be, hey, I'm an end user. I mean, it's less the case now, obviously. But I do think it is the case that end users of Kube don't necessarily understand that. I mean, that the subtlety of that definition that the beta is, hey, your object, the fields in your object are set now, and they're not going to change, but the exact way that those fields do make things happen may change. And I think that's a good way to think about it.
All right. I'm going to unfortunately have to drop off onto another call. It sounds like we're not going to work on the KEP today because of the aforementioned reasons. And you're going to distribute the other white paper doc, whatever we're going to call that thing, later this week. And I'm happy to, help out there if I can. Cool.
Okay, no worries, man. Thanks.
Thanks,
Okay,
Quentin. Thanks for joining in.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Cool.
Nick, I just shared a link to the API versioning doc.
Thanks.
Did you leave? Hello.
No, I'm here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just shared the link to the API versioning doc, and if I read the wording over there, I think it does not say anything about how long this is going to be supported. From what I remember is that there is the only guarantee is that the API server would work across +1 and -1 version of Kubernetes. That's one of the reasons why the API server has a limitation on how what it supports today with respect to version skew.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think so I think this is something, yeah, we should probably get in more clarity from the SIG API machinery, and Jordan probably is the right person to ask this question to, but yeah.
Yeah.
And we really need to understand this requirement of what does it mean by having most APIs GA? What does most mean exactly?
Yeah. So that's what I mean. Like I feel like that's sort of the general sort of definition is that most APIs should be mostly stable. So I mean, you could in this way you could say that most APIs should be GA is completely. I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah.
I think it should really be the case that there should be some GA version of Ingress by now. I mean, that said, I know that SIG networking is absolutely making a push to try and make that happen. Bowie has started a working group to try and make a GA version of Ingress v1, so that then the Ingress v2 work can actually build on a stable base instead of a beta base.
Yes. I have added the deprecation policy also to the doc that kind of says that GA support means 12 months. Probably should phrase it better. Why is it like this? Why can't I?
That's weird.
Yeah, this particular link is strange. Let me delete and add it
Yeah.
again.
Fix it.
So GA says 12 months or 3 releases, whichever is longer.
Right.
Why doesn't this? Okay. Are you able to open it now?
Yeah, I've got it. Yep. Sorry, I was just reading it. Yeah, it's interesting that rule 4A is like older API versions must be supported after their announced deprecation for a duration no longer than GA is 12 months already. So that's interesting that API versions must be supported for 12 months, even though the official support for the version is only 3 releases, which is 9 months.
So yeah, I think that kind of gives us, plus this wording gives us a way of trying to define in the future what support means, 12 months or 3 releases, whichever is longer. It could be 14 months or 4 releases, whichever is longer in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this kind of covers the fact that GA is not necessarily, we don't have to wait for V2 V1 is a version, and it's only going to be supported for 12 months, and it could change after 12 months.
Yeah.
Though break base, for example, if you change the part spec, you are going to break more people than you would. But what I do not see here is how would deprecation work.
Yeah. So I'm just reading the deprecation policy is pretty clear, like is actually reasonably clear. The documentation is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
It's just I don't think anyone ever actually reads it.
Yeah. So it's probably when you get so versioning is not Kubernetes versioning here, so it doesn't mean 1.0 of Kubernetes. It means 1.0 of the API.
This is the other important thing, that versioning means different things depending on which part of the project you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because the API versions, the API versioning is different to the overall versioning.
Yes.
And so the deprecation policy here is talking about the API versions, not and flags. Yeah, I mean, and so a lot of the stuff like deprecated behaviors must function for no less than 1 year after their announced deprecation, so that like and deprecated feature goes,
Yeah, I think it's kind of saying that, hey, once we announce deprecation, we will support it for a year.
Yeah.
That kind of is interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Like I said, that's interesting because like there's a bunch of stuff we're already supporting for a year.
So I think what it says is that it won't be removed. The API, that API or CLI flag won't be removed from Kubernetes. It just says that if you the CLI.
Yeah, it says that the important part here is the storage version, and the round tripping, because the storage version is the thing that hits the that sets the skew, like the storage version combined with the skew says tells you like how far you can go if you say like
I think this kind of also you're right. I think the skew support versus, so you probably have to upgrade your client if you want to continue using a newer version of Kubernetes. For example, you might have to update your kubectl, but if you're using only the older objects, the flag might continue to work, but the API on the other side might have deprecated. So that's a kind of interesting situation to deal with.
And I think this is one of those things where the surface is complicated. Like the surface of the problem is complicated enough that it's very difficult to. This is one of the reasons that we struggle with defining it, is that the problem surface is actually complicated. Like it's not straightforward to say what is the version skew, right? Like because it's like what do you mean by version skew? And that's why I think it's why Jordan's always careful to be like, what version are you talking about? Are you talking about the overall version, the REST version, the object version?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we don't have enough.
So yeah, I mean, we obviously can't do that much about it tonight, but I think it's good to put all the links in there to be like, these are the things that we need to care about. So I think that the API stability and the last one about well-defined and predictable paths from alpha to beta to stable, is that for API objects or for features in general? Like,
which one do you? Can you repeat that?
The last one of the impact.
The
impacts. There's a list of 4. Yeah, this one.
So I think the idea is to define saying how long can something be in alpha? How long can something be in beta? Like if something is rotting in alpha for years, probably it's a bad code, and probably if you're shipping Kubernetes with it, um, then you're actually having untested, unmaintained code as part of your release, and it's probably dead code that could actually become a backdoor someday. So it's probably good to move something from alpha to beta to stable, and when defiled and predictable means that, hey, you should probably have a proper definition for alpha that says that looks at supportability from a supportability perspective, that hey, you have tests uh, and you have enough coverage for it. And then when something goes to beta, what does it mean? I mean, we know what beta is a behavior. We know that beta is defined very well in the API versioning doc. But what does it make? How does an alpha feature become a beta feature? What's the switch? Is it like developer choice? That's developer says from now this is alpha, this is beta. That makes it that escalates the support cadence for that feature or an API. So those things are not clear.
There's a link. What's that? API changes. So, sorry. So there's a link. So I linked a K community ticket, the 4001, from the bottom one about the well-defined thing, and then in that there's a link to under SIG architecture. There's an API changes document that actually has all of that information that we just talked about. So I will put that in there too. I think that one definitely, that has some really good, this is it's a really good summary of the stuff that's in that deprecation policy.
Interesting, because this is kind of pretty away from where it should be.
It's it's really useful information, and it'd be good to be able to find that a bit easier.
But does not at least it's not period bound, so that's probably something that we should probably say. Something can be alpha for 3 releases, say max. It should not be more than that. If it can't go to stability for say a year's time, then that's a bad thing for a feature.
True. But I mean, I think that one needs to be a guideline thing rather than a hard rule, right? Like I mean, for some stuff, like sometimes it's going to be tricky to get maybe it takes you a while to sort of find the right way to solve the problem. And you don't want to rush that. It's better that things stay in alpha, because alpha has a sort of as it says in that API changes thing, like there's no commitment to complete the feature, and it might be dropped entirely if we decide it's a bad idea. And you don't want to move to beta and then be committed to finishing it if it's a bad idea, right? Like I understand what you're saying, and I agree. It shouldn't just languish in alpha forever.
I think there should be a fixed period, and that if you want to extend that period, there should be exception. The same way as we do enhancements exceptions today. The idea is that if someone's actively working on it, they are active enough to file an exception and just extend it. If they understand the policy. But if nobody's actually working on it, automatically it gets deprecated, and that's the benefit of setting it to a time period. Makes that's what I'm aiming towards, because I've seen a lot of alpha features languish for a long time, and there's less motivation to make alpha to beta to stable versus continue to use something as beta or continue to use something as alpha. And if there is generally a lack of understanding whether this is the one that we want in the future, then probably you can always file exceptions saying I need an exception for 6 months.
So we'll put a note in here to say maybe defined period for each phase with an exception process. Yeah. So just so that we've noted down what we've talked about, right? Like.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So the part here is, this seems like yeah, so I feel like you and Tim, so just looking at the 4 impacts, like you and Tim are probably the right ones to make a first pass at the bits about the improved test infra and better tooling around patching and release. Like both of you are far more involved in both testing and release and the rest of us. I feel like, yeah, and so like I'm happy with you guys to do that. Like, but I think that even us just having a little talk about this now and sort of putting a few things here, like a few links here, is a good way to make this important, like, to make this more readable. This is one of the important parts about doing a document like this, where it is a really document that's really wide in scope, is that, like, if you want someone to be able to read this KEP and not need to read all these documents for the complete background, right? Like they should be able to read this KEP, and the first page of the KEP, or the first sort of the summary and the motivation of the KEP, should make it clear to people that they want to read it, and then reading the rest of the document should not require referring to any other documents to be able to understand what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it.
Yes and no. I think otherwise the deck, if we are explaining everything in the KEP, then we probably have to write a book.
Yeah, true. But like
like we linked the policies today. I mean, if someone can read that policies and understand it, we can put a summary there of what we want to change, what we want to impact, and then reference that, saying that, okay, these are the existing policies, and people should go and read those policies to understand them better.
Yeah. Or at least trust us that we have read the policies, and that and that this is why, and we think we should change them to meet the problem statement.
I agree.
And that's what I'm saying. Like the wording of the problem statement is really important, because you want to, like, the way to make this document coherent is to have it so that wording gets used every time you talk about how you want to solve the problem statement. Like, so for API stability, you can be like, so the problem statement is that we want to, extend. We want to make life easier for. We want to sort of, broadly, it's going to be something like, we're extending it to a year because most business cycles are a year. Is sort of the reason to do that is that most business cycles kind of roll around a year, and because we're because we're shorter than a year right now, it's almost guaranteed that at some point in a few years' use, it will happen at the worst time of the year for your business.
I think
us being able to say, we're extending this to a year, and it will impact the API stability policy in the way that we need to add this and change this and do this. And that's important because it's going to mean that as a user, you can rely on the fact that this stuff will last for at least a year. Also.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is kind of new. I don't think the rest of the community and the project are focusing, saying, okay, why do we need a year? The perspective that we are sharing, the user perspective, is different from the developer community perspective of project. That's why I think the work on the problem statement that me and Tim are doing is, we started with charter like this. We said these are the various kinds of issues that are getting raised ad hoc across the community. When we did survey, this is what we saw in the data. And when we did the pragmatic analysis of, hey, from data, the users are saying we need this, so we probably need to do something like this. But when you look at the project, you're not there yet. So what should the project improve on? What should the project exercise on? And making this minimal viable change will also give us an exercise of making, say, the versions queue longer, or making, say, the tests better and upgrades better. I think that's where the document is going towards. But yeah, the reason it's a document is because we don't want people to get lost in the history of the working group, and KEP should be minimal enough for people to say yes or no.
Yep.
So that
and
they can
at least aware of some of the history of the working group, then they can be like, yeah, I don't need to read that. I trust these guys or whatever.
The KEP's major point is yearly support period plus 2 months of grace periods. That is what the KEP is needing approval for.
Yeah.
And to explain why, we probably should put in a different document, because if we disagree on something over there, it should not impact the acceptability of the KEP. So keeping the KEP minimally worded and putting everything else in reference documents will help KEP be free of anything that is not.
The last thing you want is people convincing on the wording of the.
Say skip upgrades. It was part of the KEP. It does probably harms the yearly support period, because skip upgrades is difficult to implement today when we don't even have proper upgrade testing for existing policies. So that's the reason why the problem statement document is different. And then probably it's also a place where you can probably put more stuff there, and then link, branch out.
Okay, sure. Yeah, awesome. I think that, like I said, I don't have a problem with it. Like it's more just like, we need to be clear on what we're trying to achieve with each thing, so that then, we can all make, because this is going to be a hard sell, right? Like this KEP is a really hard sell. Like,
I think this is a minimal change, and if it's a hard sell, then probably the project doesn't want to change it. That's the ice we need to break. So yeah,
I agree, and that was why I wanted to put in that thing about minimum viable, right? Like it's like, hey, everybody feels, it seems like nobody is happy with current like release process, right? Like the people who are working on it, like, and who are devs, are not happy because they can't get their stuff out fast enough. And the people who are users are like, my God, will you stop releasing new versions? I can't keep up. And, like even the cloud providers are having trouble keeping up, right? Like
it's okay if you release new versions, but don't duplicate the version that I'm using right now.
Yeah. Like, I mean, the 1.14 was only made available in like the last couple of weeks for GKE. Now that I'm working on Contour, like I'm using GKE, so I can actually have a cluster, but like I could only hit the upgrade to 1.14 button like this week, or like maybe last week, and that's only because 1.16 is out and 1.13 is out of support, right? Like, and so, when even, your big cloud providers who are putting a lot of time and effort and resources into updating their cube setups can only just keep up with 3 releases, like that's a big indication that the change services is really big. So and I think it's one of those things that anyone who's thought about it for a minute will understand, but like the problem is that all of the people who are going to chime in on this KEP are going to be people who haven't thought about it for a minute.
I think when we go to SIG-Arch and others, as Jordan has volunteered to do that, we probably will have much better. We will need much better wording there, because I think I think there are people who have broader understanding of the project, who have thought about this problem longer, probably have different versions of solutions, and that's where the hard sell for me is, convincing them to probably decide. And that's where all this documentation would come in place. We're saying that, hey, we have also thought about it strong enough. Hey, look at this doc. When you read this, what do you think?
Yeah, we're not just pulling this out of our butt to be like, hey, we should just do something.
Yep.
Like we've actually thought long and hard about exactly what we should do. And yeah.
So I think we're not making progress on the doc. Instead, let's like you said, let me work on the infra tests and the tooling and patching. Me and Tim make progress there. If you want to add, you can add on the API stability. You probably could give us a summary on what's existing right now. Make it brief so that it's not, nobody has to go through those links to understand the purpose, but if they have any specific questions, they can go to the links to understand. Hey,
it's actually really interesting for me as well, because one of the things we're doing on Contour at the moment is changing the version of is deprecating a CRD and introducing a new CRD that we want to rapidly bring to GA. And
Yeah.
so, Dave Cheney has been like, he didn't understand, because with the Go client, having multiple versions of a CRD is like a real bitch. Like you've got to,
This meeting is getting recorded.
yeah, sorry, my bad. It's really hard, and the apologies for that.
It's tough. I mean, I faced the same thing. I think with Go clients are difficult. That's why I brought this up, saying that there's kind of still some murkiness about, hey, what is exactly the support around the Go clients and the repo inside /k/k. So the staging repos and there's so many things out there.
Yeah. That's obviously confusing. Anyway, we should close
focus on that. Yes, I think that's where you can help. Maybe probably probably populate that section with more data on what's existing, and since you said you already need this too.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, no problems. I will I'll check it out. Okay, no worries. I think we can probably call it then.
Yes, we can call the meeting 8 minutes early. Thanks.
Back to bed.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
No, it's cheers. Bye.